Howdy. So, there's a good bit to talk about in this video. First off, I'm going to specify that this tier list is a general tier list. I will make an endless tier list later. Before I get started on the tier list though, I'm going to talk about the new units and what they do, as well as the new changes to traits they made this update. Starting with Sonk. I'll be entirely honest here, Sonk is just not that good. They are literally just tails, but with one less placement, less range. They have a passive that really isn't that good, and they are pierce instead of single target. I just use base tails if I'm being honest. Sonk has a DPS of 40 when maxed out and a DPS of 200 at max placement. With their best trait, Chaos Control, they have a DPS of 80 when maxed out and a DPS of 400 at max placement. As a reference, Tails with his best trait, Chaos Control, has a DPS of 80 when maxed out and a DPS of 480 at max placement. Not to mention Tails has a base range stat of 24, while Sonk has a base range stat of 20. Sonk's passive makes them do 25% more damage every 5th attack. It's definitely not good enough to consider using over something like Tails though. I really only think this unit exists to evolve into Super Sonk when part 2 of the update comes out. You get Sonk by beating Wave 100 in Endless. Next up is 2017X. This is actually my favorite unit in the game currently because of how he works, but I'll try not to glaze him too much. 2017X will always copy Sonic's stats up until the final upgrade. When he reaches his final upgrade, Upgrade 5, he'll turn into his Broken Face form, changing from single target to cone AoE and losing a lot of range. This will block every other 2017X you place down from entering their final upgrade, only being able to go up to Upgrade 4. However, having one Broken Face will buff every other 2017X owned by you. This used to be a 50% damage buff when I got to playtest him, but it seems to have been nerfed to a 25% damage buff. He's meant to be good early, mid, and late game, but I really only think he's good mid and late game. He's just not that good on placement, and on top of that, if you don't use Chaos Control, then he really just isn't that amazing. It's more worth to use Chaos Control, his best trait, and take the cost hit. Him being single target paired with the fact that he doesn't do that great damage on placement makes him a mediocre starter. He is, however, top 3 in DPS in the entire game, making him amazing in Endless. With Chaos Control, a single 2017X with a Broken Face present has a DPS of 100.5, and a max placement 2017X, not including Broken Face, DPS is 402.1. Broken Face has a DPS of 265.4, giving 2017X with Chaos Control a total DPS of 667.5. That is just barely worse than Metal Sonic after his buffs, easily making him the second best in DPS. You get 2017X when you beat Wave 200 on Endless. Now let's move on to the trait changes. Speed of Sound was nerfed. It now doesn't give the same DPS that Chaos Control gives. I mostly only think this trait is good for either single target focused Cursed Puppeteer Cream and starters you don't want to take the price increase on. I 100% understand the nerf though. Getting the same DPS as Chaos Control for close to no drawback is kind of crazy. Master Plan was buffed with a 5% damage increase, bringing its damage increase percentage from 20% to 25%. Telekinesis was buffed and nerfed, the nerf being knockback only ignores enemies with knockback immunity, so basically only bosses, and not knockback cooldown. The buffs are it now affects stun and slow instead of just knockback, making units with stun and slow able to stun and slow enemies with immunity. Again, basically just bosses. Stuns only last for 10% of their duration on enemies with immunity, and slow only does 25% of its slow multiplier to enemies with immunity. While I was in the middle of making this video, Telekinesis actually got buffed again. That 20% damage debuff it got is now removed, making it even better than it was before. Now that all of that is out of the way, let's move on to the updated tier list. Starting in S tier, 2017X. I know I said he wasn't that good early game, but he's not terrible and can still be used as a starter. He's just not the best starter. The fact that he's top 3 of the best DPS in the game, and with how versatile he is, I honestly think he's the best general unit in the game right now. Metal Sonic. He's now stronger than ever after his last buff. He does even more damage than he used to, and the change that makes him stop attacking when there's no enemies in his range, from 0.25 seconds to 1 second, is very noticeable. Getting stunned still does hurt him a lot more than it does to everyone else though. I'd say that's really his only weakness, honestly. Snowbrawler Knuckles. He was okay before. A telekinesis snowbrawler stalled bosses that didn't have any movement options pretty well, but after his buff, he just does his job so much better than he used to. Festive Lord X. He was buffed, generally increasing his DPS by around 50, give or take. He is 100% the best starter in the game without a doubt in my mind. Biggie Claws. He's still really good, I just feel like he's not as useful as he used to be. With the new buffs and the new good unit, I feel he kind of fell down just a bit this update, even after his buff. And to be honest with you, his buff really isn't that good. Unless you have something like Speed of Sound on him, which I wouldn't recommend, especially after the trait getting nerfed, then the knockback cooldown buff doesn't really come into effect much, if at all, due to his high attack cooldown. Cursed Puppeteer Cream. Still a great unit, even after her nerfs. Definitely not the monster she used to be though, so I have to move her down. She'll still take care of all the smaller enemies for you though. Don't sleep on that poison AoE. Moving to A tier, Eggman. I sort of underestimated him. His Buzz Bombers can dish out quite a bit of damage. I just can't ignore how useful he is, especially after his buff, Gingerbread House. This unit is definitely more consistent than Eggman with small summons. The biggest reason why it's lower than Eggman though is because I feel like the gunners on this unit are its bread and butter. Without the gunners, this unit is decent, and you're not guaranteed to get the gunners every time you use its ability. I think they did buff the chances to get a gunner through the ability though, if I'm not wrong. I don't know. It's not in the changelogs, but I swear the chances to get a gunner didn't used to be this high. Engineer Tails. I still don't like this unit. However, he is pretty good after his buff. He finally surpasses base Tails at DPS now. He still has such a painful setup though. If Tails himself had Pierce or maybe even Splash while his turrets stayed single target, then this unit would feel much better to use. Although honestly, that might make him a bit overpowered. As of right now though, I still don't think he's great to be used as a starter. Frost Queen Blaze. Don't get me wrong, she still does solid damage. Her ability is really good and her passive is nice, but I feel like she's fallen a bit behind this update. Ruth. After playing with her some more, I can see why she's considered a good starter. I mean, she's cheaper than Festive Lord X overall, it's just that placement price is sort of brutal for a starter. That and her range is just so small. She's not bad, but she certainly doesn't feel the best to use. Cream and Cheese. Sadly, she took a pretty heavy hit to her prices this update. I think it was needed, but they really shot her prices up. Y'all did not need to go that far. She's still worth using though. Tails. Yeah, I had to move him up after calculating his DPS. He's really up there DPS-wise for being an epic unit, even if he is single target. Pumpman. Even after the Master Plan buff, I can't warrant keeping Pumpman too high. He's still pretty good, but the fact that his burn doesn't stack holds him back by a lot. You kinda have to use one on poison, one on burn, and another on slow or stun. It really kills his viability. Amy the Bat. She did get a buff this update, but I don't think it was good enough to keep her very relevant. I still think she's mainly used for her support, even after that attack type buff. She just doesn't do enough damage and her ability isn't good enough, especially after the Snowbrawler buff. I still really love her design though. Classic Tails. He's the best slower in the game, and after the recent change to telekinesis, he's actually pretty good now. Now on to B tier, Sonk. They are just like Tails but worse. Sure, Sonk has Pierce and that passive, but it doesn't really make them worth using over a unit that's just better and easier to obtain. Sonic. His rework definitely made him better, but I still think he's not all that great. I am very excited for Supersonic though. Rouge the Witch. She is now the best starter cost-wise. Maybe if we get an act that's really tight on money, then she could be very, very good, but as of right now, she's okay at best. Snowboarder Silver. Why? Why did they nerf him this bad? He was decent before the nerf, but now? I can't even look at him anymore. Ghost Chow. That 1.2 times damage boost still isn't all that great. If you want a buffer, just use Cream and Cheese, even after her nerf. Now on to C tier, Amy. They killed her. She is dead. She used to be my favorite starter, but now? I wouldn't even touch her with a 10-foot pole. Skelenik. The buff he got is actually pretty good. He's an okay starter. At least he's usable now. Chili Dog Stand. Sure, that buff it got before the update dropped is really good and all, but money is something you just don't struggle with in this game. The only time you do is at the start of a round, and even then, Chili Dog Stand isn't worth bringing. You're better off defending with a starter unit just to get your money back at the start of rounds. Don't waste a unit slot on this. Down to D tier, Knuckles. He's just bad. Sure, he does okay damage, but he's single target and his stun is barely even noticeable. Snowballer Amy. She got a buff for some reason. It doesn't really help her much at all. I really don't know why they buffed her in the first place. She still isn't usable. Classic Sonic. He's the exact same. Wasn't touched at all. Excited for Classic Super Sonic though.
What? Who's there? Go back to sleep, Dad. Okay. You're very precious to me.